So I'm going to start the recording here, and I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to mute everybody and then sort of unmute some certain people, only because we're getting some feedback here, and I'm not quite sure why we're getting that. So if you do have questions or want to say something, why don't you go ahead and say something to Chris? Can I unmute you, Chris? I can. And then you can tell me. All right, perfect. Okay.
Sounds good.
Only because we were getting a lot of feedback there. All right, so welcome to the inaugural session of what we hope will be a very informative series of seminars that we're going to be planning. And we also want to make sure that Nancy's unmuted, okay? And so there's a short little history on this. Nancy Von Meyer and I were talking, and she was asking me to sort of show her some things on ArcGIS Pro. And I was showing her, and she was looking at it saying, well, this is pretty amazing stuff. Where else can I find more information on this? And we sort of said, well, we don't know. So Nancy and I were talking, and we decided to go ahead and do this. So with that, Nancy and I have gone and decided to sort of host this series. And I'm very thankful for Nancy, both for her friendship, because we've known each other a very long time, and for also we constantly challenge one another and help one another through this. So Nancy, I'll let you talk for a little bit. Go ahead. Can we hear Nancy now? Let me unmute that. Nancy, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay.
So Frank, again, thank you for hosting this. And again, Frank and I have known each other longer than either of us will admit. And we have we've been working with this ESRI parcel stuff from the beginning. So when ESRI first moved to the parcel fabric, we worked together with ESRI to look at some of the domains of values and how the local government information model was structured. And then again, when it transferred to ArcGIS Pro and ESRI decided to move to a new platform, we did some work with ESRI on that. But my concern is always the on-ramp. So my concern is, sure, I get the glitzy stuff in the middle and the kind of the sexy stuff when you're doing some real high-powered stuff, but when I come home from a webinar or from a conference and I turn on ArcGIS Pro and I look at it, it's like, now what, right? I've got it launched and I'm looking at it. What's next? How do I get started? And Frank has done so much work with getting people off the bandwagon, and since we're all sort of stuck at home with our families, which is great, but I think our dogs are all going to go into shock when we go back to work. But I think that it's a good opportunity for us to just take a little break from our work at home day and learn something. So the goal of this is to really give you an on-ramp. We're not going to get into Python programming, or we're not going to get into arcade and all that kind of stuff. The idea is you turn on ArcGIS Pro, I'm sorry, it's called, and now what? So with that, I guess we'll start. And Chris, thanks for helping out too. Your ability to produce these things and keep us going is much appreciated.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm happy to help.
Thanks. Well, that gives me a chance to sort of introduce Panda, because we do have people in here who don't know who Panda is. We are a professional services firm in South Florida. And again, I hate to do this. I'm going to mute everybody and sort of unmute Chris and Nancy. I'll leave you unmuted. Only because we're getting feedback from certain people. I'm not sure why. But again, we are down here in South Florida, but we have clients throughout the United States, and we have been working with parcels and parcel fabric, again, like Nancy, longer than we care to admit. Panda was formed in 1998, and we immediately became an ESRI business partner. Even before I formed Panda Consulting, I actually was working closely with ESRI and their software, I was actually a beta tester on ArcView 1 before they actually knew what they were doing with ArcView. And it was originally called Thematic Mapper, and it was supposed to take coverages and allow you to create, thematic maps, both chloroplethic maps and just regular thematic maps with those coverages. And that's sort of the beginning of ESRI's desktop endeavors. And I was a beta tester on that. I am a professional surveyor in Florida and in South Carolina. So in Florida, I get the PLSS element of it. And in South Carolina, I get the colonial states on there. So I sort of get a little bit of everything. I have taught surveying and mapping back in the 85 to 95 at the local state college. I am basically just an educator. I help people understand things. I'm a past president of the Florida Association of Cadastral Mappers. I'm also currently still a member of the Florida Board of Professional Surveyors and Mappers. So I am a platypus. I'm one of those strange creatures. I live in both worlds, and I'm a little bit of both. But I sort of try to bring that to help everybody understand what we're doing, both with parcels and in technology, just at there. So some of you know me, some of you don't know me, but I'm glad you're all here. So what I also want to do is introduce Chris. Chris is actually my son, but more importantly, he's a member of Panda Consulting. So Chris, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm a geospatial technician for Panda Consulting. I've been working with Panda for about a little over 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. But my background prior to working with Panda has been philosophy and film and technology. So entering Panda in 2017, besides all the knowledge that I already had just growing up with Frank as my father, I had a lot to learn about GIS. But yeah, that's really kind of my background. I've spent the last 3 years kind of studying under Frank and studying under Brian at Panda and just absorbing as much as I possibly can about this world.
Chris also, while he was in college, he went to the University of Central Florida in Orlando. While he was in college, he went to work for Apple. He actually worked for them for 5.5 years. And so, he knows the technology inside and out, and we're thankful he came to work with us. And so Chris is going to be moderating. All right. So if you have any questions, write them in the chat window. All right. And Chris is going to go and he'll go and forward them on to me. So while we're at that, let's talk about sort of GoToMeeting. Some people have used it a lot. Some people haven't. I just want to make sure we all understand what the general interface is. This is sort of what you should be looking at on GoToMeeting. And you will see here, my screen share will be in the middle there. But a couple things. There's a pull down at the very top of it, which allows you to go and show whether or not you're just looking at the moderator, whether you're looking at all active cameras, or whether you want to hide everyone, or whether you want to see a spot for everybody. You might want to go and adjust that. Also, if you go over to the People tab, it will actually show you everyone that's in here at the moment. All right. And then more importantly, here's the chat window. You can click on the chat window, and then there's an area down there where you can actually chat. Anything you put in there will be available to everyone unless you pull it down and specifically tell somebody or actually chat privately with one person on there. Finally, for those of you that haven't quite got that camera set up yet, if you click on the gear setting, it actually will allow you to go and change your audio, your video if you have it, and that's how you go. So, all right. So, what is our goal here? And Nancy and I have talked quite a bit about this. Our goal is to not make this a webinar. Our goal is to make this an interactive learning experience. All right. Which means that there's not going to be a whole lot of lecture on here. I'll be doing a lot of demos in here and such. And I only have a few slides. It's barely even worth it not even worth it to go and show it to you. And this is supposed to be an event. This is not supposed to be a webinar. I don't want you sitting back there. I want you to be participating in this. And you must ask questions. All right, please, please, please. There's nothing worse than me sitting here and lecturing for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. And Chris will moderate, and he'll go and let us know whether or not we have questions and such. Before I do that, I want to go and thank you all for participating in this. So I just want to let you know that what we've done is we've sent out these email notices. Hopefully all of you got them. They are coming from MailChimp, which means that sometimes it gets caught in your spam filter. Please check spam to see whether or not you've got these. All right. And we're going to continue to use these. But, and this is very important, at the very bottom of it, there is a subscribe link. All right. Because this first one we sort of sent out with mailings and stuff like this. We're not going to do that anymore. It's now going to be, I'm going to send it out from MailChimp. If you're on it, you'll get it. Otherwise, we're going to ask you to just subscribe and make sure that that's how we're going to manage the mailing list here. And if you click on update your preferences at the very bottom of that list, it will go and bring you up and make sure that you set your preferences, you know, what email you want, what you want to be called and stuff. But most importantly, you'll see a grouping on there called bamboo, you know, panda bamboos. So a group of pandas is called a bamboo. All right. So these are different groupings for pandas. And one of the things you'll see in those of you that have been involved and friends of ours for a long time, you will see the Panda Parcel Fabric Forum. We're going to continue with that. And this is how you sign up for the forum. This is primarily the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, but we pull in both of these. And you will see that, in fact, we're beginning to start a second option. This is a specific forum series, you know, a seminar series just focused on the Pro Parcel Fabric, what it is, how it works, what the tools are, all of that. What you're seeing now is the ArcGIS Pro Seminar Series, and this is just nothing but Pro, ArcGIS Pro, and editing and setting it up and all sorts of things. And then finally, we're going to start something new called Panda Deep Dives. These are really in-depth discussions about one topic per session. It may be anything from arcade to sort of how to do a certain thing, specific techniques. There's all sorts of things we're going to go through. So please, when you get a chance, make sure you sign up and subscribe to the series and make sure you pick which of these you want to go on. Right now, our thought process is that we will be having one of these per week. By the way, we're looking at Chris's cat right now, who just climbed on the back of his seat.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. That's part of our video. That's part of our life now, isn't it? And looking at all of our pets and becoming part of our meetings. So we're planning on having these once a week, and it will rotate between these four so that literally you will have one session per month on the Panda Parcel Fabric, one on here, one on the seminar series, and one on the deep dives. So please subscribe, and we'll go from there. So with that, I am going to put away the slides.
Before you start, Dad, Larry wants to know if you can take a moment to describe your relationship with the ESRI Parcel Fabric developers.
Okay. Thanks, Larry. So my relationship is, I have actually what I think is a very good relationship. I have a close relationship with it. I had mentioned that I was a beta tester since the very beginning. I am still testing ESRI software. I am currently a member of their early adopter program. I am currently testing ArcGIS Pro 2.6 alpha release. We're now on alpha 2. we may have just released Alpha 3 on it, which every time they do a build, they'll go and put it in there. I'm testing that functionality, giving them feedback on whether it works, whether it doesn't work, how they should implement it a little bit better, and doing just some overall troubleshooting. So I am communicating with ESRI's development team several times a week, back and forth. I have been through holistic testing. I've gone out to Redlands several times for holistic testing with them and given them feedback on it. So we as Panda Consulting are extremely closely involved with ESRI on their development of their software, specifically the Parcel Fabric software and even Pro. Through this holistic testing, we have developed some relationships with some of ESRI's development team on the editing team, and I'll tell you every once in a while that we actually have some tools that you will see that are a result of some of our feedback, that it would be nice if you could do this and not do it this way, but do it this way. So yeah, we are sort of quasi input for them to sort of give them some feedback. For those of you that are gotten started using in ArcGIS Pro, one of the most recent ones was the ability to go and take a traverse file that you use to create a traverse of lines and save it out and then bring it back in. The dev team didn't think it was necessary. I had to strongly lobby for that, and they finally put it in 2.5, and it's a nice feature again. So go ahead.
So in all transparency, I also am an ESRI business partner, but pretty low end. I don't work so much on the tech side as Frank does, but I'm involved with things like data models and domains, and supported ESRI more strongly when the local information model, but also then in the migration of the PLSS in particular. So my work with ESRI's developers is more on the data design side than on the software interface side.
And Nancy, don't be modest. You actually wrote the book on land records and GIS, so please.
It's too old now. So.
Yeah, well. Yeah, so yeah, but both Nancy and I, well, Fairview and Panda Consulting are all business partners with ESRI, and yeah, yep. I think one of the things that's different though about us is that we are not business partners from a marketing standpoint, but we are business partners from a technical consulting standpoint. And one of the things that I think marks us are the fact that we will tell you an honest opinion of what's working and not working inside of there. So. All right. So shall we start? So I've preloaded Chris with some questions that I know I get asked all the time, right? So Chris, why don't you tell me some of these questions and what's going on?
So I think a good place to start is to talk a little bit about, in your opinion, what you think the difference is between ArcGIS Pro and the current ArcMap are, as well as it might be good to address whether or not when you're transitioning to ArcGIS Pro, if you need a new computer to do this. So maybe if you could speak to that.
Good, yeah. So I can tell you that with ArcGIS Pro, ESRI took a step back. And this happens often within software development. Once you take one sort of metaphor and paradigm and you keep pushing it, and they took the opportunity with ArcGIS Pro to step back and say, let us reevaluate, let us think about what we've been doing and how to do it better, how to do it a little bit simpler in their viewpoint, not necessarily for the people that have been working with our software for a while, but for the new users. How do we get them to understand it a little bit better? And one of the core differences with ArcGIS Pro is that, and I've talked to the dev team a lot about this, that one of their goals was to make it so that you didn't have to know as much about the data structures, but let the software understand the data structures more. And as we start going through this, you'll understand a little bit more. So I'll just sort of give you some examples. Inside of ArcGIS Pro, or inside of ArcMap, there's really about 5 different tools that were developed different times, in sort of the spectrum of how long the development's going on inside of ArcMap for taking a line and splitting it. There was the interactive split where you go and click on the line, and wherever you click, that's where it's going to split. There was a divide tool, which allowed you to divide it into a certain number of segments on there. There was a proportion tool, which would allow you to go and divide it on here. There was an intersect tool, which would allow you to divide it that way. So that you had all of these different tools scattered all over the interface. And if you knew where they were, that was very easy to remember. But if you didn't know where they were, if you weren't a long-time user of the software, it was very challenging to figure out where it was and what it meant and such. So what they did is they looked at that and said, well, how about if we just create one tool, which if you have a line selected, it will understand that you have a line selected. And if you have the line selected and you click on divide, it will give you the option to do all these different variations on that at the same time. And that's literally what's happened, but that's happened all across the interface so that the software understands what you're working on, what you have selected or even not selected, and allows you to have just those tools available to you at that time. Another example is when you're going, and one of the things inside of parcel mapping is often you want to go and calculate what the COGO values are, what the coordinate geometry values are of a specific line. What was the bearing? What's the distance? What is it, a curve? Is it not a curve? Those sorts of things, and have them populated in the fields. Well, when you have that active, now you can only select lines because that's the only thing it works against. And it sort of goes and goes all the way through the software. With parcels, when we get to parcels, when you're dealing with the parcel fabric, it understands the difference between a shapefile, a feature class inside of a file geodatabase, and a parcel, so that the tools act differently as it looks at what you have selected or what you're working against. So it's a radically different approach. So the editor doesn't necessarily have to go and know exactly what they're doing each time. They just sort of have to know what they want to do. I know one of the things that I've talked about is the fact that the software was always very stupid. It didn't do what I wanted it to do. It always did what I told it to do. And now they're trying to go and change that so that you telling it what you want to do is often what you want to do. Okay, so there is the major difference in there, on ArcGIS Pro. You will note that you can install ArcGIS Pro on the same machine that you have ArcMap on. It's a completely different set of code, and it will still run alongside of it. Please don't think that you need separate machines for it. However, do be aware that ArcGIS Pro is completely new software, which means you don't want to run it on old computers. All right. And while you don't need a new computer for it, let me just go and show you right now. I am running this on my workstation. And by the way, what you're seeing on the screen right now is a virtual machine. We at Panda, everything runs on Macintosh computers, on Apple Macintosh, only because we prevent sort of viruses from coming in and stuff. And we literally only run GIS in Windows. But my machine is actually a Xeon processor. It has 32 gigs of memory on it, has a really nice video card on it. So I have a nice new computer on here. But it doesn't have to be that robust. But it does need to be a fairly new computer to go and do that. especially if you're planning on doing anything with 3D. ArcGIS Pro is much more visual than ArcMap was. All right. So, any other new questions yet?
Not yet. No.
Okay.
That being said, why don't you touch on whether or not you're able to set the settings to ensure that the software updates automatically. And there are a lot of kind of preset things in the application. So maybe talking about how you set units, directions, stuff like that is a good idea.
Okay, so let me go and open up ArcGIS Pro. All right. And this, by the way, is ArcGIS Pro 2.5. This is the latest full release that's out there. So the first question is, well, how do I make sure that this thing stays up to date all the time? And if I go over here and I go to settings, it opens up, and under the settings tab, on the bottom here, I have check for updates on startup. If you have this checked, every time you start it up, it will check to see whether or not there's a new update and ask you if you want to download it. All right, it's a nice new feature. Some IT administrators balk at this because you're installing new software on your computer, but I find it's really nice. I can share with you that with some elements of Parcel Fabric, you want to go and make sure that your desktop software keeps up with your server software when you're doing Parcel Fabric in multi-editor. All right, and you want to make sure that you keep that synced. So if your enterprise is at 10.7.1, do not install 2.5. Keep it at 2.4, and actually it's up to 2.4.3 right now. So you want to keep that at the same level to do that. I know that Mark said, do you need a local admin to update ArcGIS Pro? And I'm not sure. I think that you can install it for yourself, but if you want to install it for other users on your computer, you might need administrative privileges to do that. It's a good question, Mark. I'm not quite sure on that. All right. Okay. So
Larry also wants to know if you can expand on the relationship between Pro and AGOL and Enterprise for licensing access, data sharing, etc. Can you talk about that a little bit?
okay. So one of the other differences with Pro is that it is written from scratch to work with web services. So again, it understands what data structures you're working with and adjusts itself to go and do that. So that if in fact, and that's one of the other things, when I first started this, you will note that I've signed in over here. All right, I signed in, and actually I'm signing into my ArcGIS Online account for this. And that actually is how I set my licensing level, is at that, the administration comes from either enterprise or ArcGIS Online organizational account as far as what licensing level I'm at. ESRI still has those three main levels, the basic, standard, and advanced on here to go and handle that. So again, the relationship between ArcGIS Pro Desktop and the enterprise, it still has that same relationship where it allows you to go and access any data, but the difference is the way that it provides access to that data. All right, so that within ArcMap, which an ArcMap was set up for basic client server implementation, and the access was provided either through your desktop authentication or through other means, whether database authentication. It was set up through traditional client server implementation. With ArcGIS Pro, those access privileges have been signed up and assigned according to your access privileges with your named user. All right. the licensing is a little bit different. You utilize named user on here versus having a license file stored on your computer. It doesn't have that anymore, which in some ways is actually very nice because we actually use a lot of virtual machines, and there was nothing worse than having a license file on somebody's machine and having it locked on that machine and not being able to access it from anywhere. With Pro, when you log into your license, let's call it a license portal, it then assigns it to you, and you don't have to worry about that as much. So again, the privileges are set by that portal. If you have access privileges, if you have edit privileges, it's set there. It's not necessarily set at the client server implementation element of it. All right.
But for people that are just getting started, Frank, I mean, if you're running a single desktop ArcGIS, ArcMap, whatever they're called, ArcMap implementation, and you have an ArcGIS Pro software as well, you can go ahead and just launch that on your machine. It's licensed as a part of your normal, if you're just a single desktop, right? So it's licensed the same. You don't need to buy another license for it.
No.
It comes with your license comes with both the ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro. And then when you launch Arc Pro on your desktop, you'll see Frank was prompted. If he hadn't been already logged into ArcGIS Online, he would have been prompted to log in to ArcGIS Online. So,
right. It actually is using those named servers or named users, and so that you will use your organizational account for ArcGIS Online. So if you're up on maintenance, if you're current on maintenance, you will have a set number of named users that you can identify in your ArcGIS Online account or in your enterprise server. You'll be able to do it that way. So in essence, it's changed from the single user licensing to this licensing software that resides either on ArcGIS Online or Enterprise. But it is free software as long as you're up on maintenance, as long as you're current on maintenance. It is available to you, and you can go ahead and install it. You also can install it on multiple machines, but you can only log into those machines. You know, when you log in, it goes and allows you to use it on that machine. All right.
Dennis wants to know how well will. Oh, sorry, Nancy. Go for it.
I was going to kind of get at Dennis's question. So, Frank, can you go back to how, when you first launched ArcGIS Pro, what screen were you presented with after you'd logged into your ArcGIS Online account? So this is what's really annoying to, this is my personal pet peeve.
Yes.
So this is annoying. So this is where you need to know how to start. And this is kind of beginning to get at Dennis's question about the data, which, you know, we can start that. But before we do that, I want everyone to know that we are using Luna County, New Mexico sample data set that they have graciously allowed us to use as demo data set.
Thank you, Nancy. I forgot about that. Yes, so actually on that invite, you will actually see a link to the sample data which is used for this. So you can go and download that data, and if you want to follow us, you can go ahead and follow us. Try to keep up with that. I can tell you it's usually tough to do that, and this session is being recorded, so that you'll be able to go and download the recording and go through the recording and actually work through all of the steps exactly, and sort of pause it as I'm going through these things, and you'll be able to work through the whole thing for it. So don't be as concerned about that, but just know that we are using some sample data that Nancy put up, and that it's available to you by clicking on that download link. Thank you, Nancy. Yeah. So before we go to settings, let's go and talk about this. Well, if I have some data that I'm using, what do I do now? What do I do with this? All right. So if we have an existing map document, an MXD from ArcMap, we can go in there and we can import that. All right. But in this case, we don't have it. We just have a couple of shape files that Nancy provided. So I want to create, and I want to start with a new map document. All right, so I can use a blank template and create a new map document. All right, so when I click on this map document, it'll ask me, so what is that? What's the name of this thing? So I'm going to give it a name. I could put spaces in here, whatever. That's the name of it. And then where is this data located? On mine, I actually have it on a shared folder out on my server, but you can have it local or whatever. This is where it is. This is the folder. Now, what this is going to do, and I'm going to go in and look at this once I get it in place here, it's going to open up and create a new map document, but load nothing in there. It's just going to be empty, completely empty. All right. Now what?
But it has created something on your hard drive, right, Frank? I mean,
It
this
has
is
created many things on
yeah.
Yes, yes. And if I actually look at catalog, and by the way, you may open it up the first time and not even see any of these panes over here. If you go to view, you can say, show me a catalog pane. Now these things are called panes, and you can go and move them around and dock them all over. And this is a catalog pane. It's similar to the catalog window that used to be in ArcMap. All right. And I had connected to a folder when I made my map document. It made a connection over to that folder that I had, in which I called ArcGIS Pro sample data. And you'll note it's there. When I open up that folder, I see here are the shape files that Nancy has given me. All right. These are the shape files that I have. Now, if I had a database in there, it would actually show me that file geodatabase in there that I could use in that folder. However, it does not use personal geodatabases, only file geodatabases, and then you could create connections over to SDE and such. All right, only file geodatabases, not personal geodatabases. But what Nancy was also pointing out is the fact that it also created this thing called a default GDB, a default file geodatabase. For every project that you create, it creates a default GDB. A lot of us that were early beta testers really were hounding them about this. It's like, we don't want these things all over the place. And their response was that we are beginning to save things associated with your project in the default database. So it's important that we keep this thing around. All right. It's important. Now, the reality is, if you have a file geodatabase, you can go and make that file geodatabase the default instead of this one, but you still wind up with a default GDB on your folder system. It's there. You can't get around it. It's there. You can remove it eventually if you replace it with a different file as your default, different file to your database. But right now, it's creating a default GDB. So when you create a new project with a map in it, it goes and creates a folder connection, and it creates a default GDB. So if I wish to go and take these three, I can select them from catalog and I can drag them, or I can right click and say add them to my current map document. When I add them to my current map document, just as with ArcMap, the first data set that gets put into your table of contents, the coordinate system of that first one, that is your projection for your map layers on here. That's the projection that everything's going to be projected into on the fly to go and map. All right. So Dennis, your question was, well, how Well, will data from older versions of ArcMap transfer to ArcGIS Pro? Literally, there is no transfer. It goes and reads those older, that data that you had associated with ArcMap, it reads it transparently. There is nothing that has to be done to it on here at all. It just gets to use it. You know, we were actually, as we were making this transition from Map to Pro several years ago now, we would edit it in Map, then we call it up in Pro, then we go back and we edit it in Map, and we look at it in Pro. We go back and forth all the time. It really does nothing with your data. It just goes and gives you two different applications that you can view it in and edit it in. Again, ArcGIS Pro will edit shapefiles. It will edit file geodatabases. It will edit SDE geodatabases. It will also edit web services. And this is another reason where Pro is actually a lot better than Map, is that it allows you to go and connect up to a web service and edit it right out of the bat. If you have edit rights on it, you can access it and begin editing it. There is no download, edit, upload, none of that. It allows you to edit real time those web services on there. Okay? Okay. So let's go back here. We had some settings that we want to be aware of. And this is similar to ArcMap, in which those of us that were doing parcel editing in ArcMap, we had to learn very quickly that the first thing we had to do when we started editing, we had to go and set what are the units that you're using, what about bearings or directions that you're using, all of that. It's the same way here. If you go to project and then go to options, all right? If you go to options, you have underneath the current settings, by the way, there's the name of my project, there's the location of the project, here's my home folder for that project, and whether or not I have a default geodatabase on here, and what's my default toolbox. If I go to units, this is where I set the units that I'm going to be editing, that I'm going to be utilizing. So if I pull down, I have distance units, and in this case, I'm using feet, and that's fine. So by the way, and this is going to deep dive here real quickly. So while it can go and utilize both imperial and US units, the reality is that the software is set up to be metric as much as possible. So you will see everything in equivalent to meters. So when I say feet, it actually is what's the equivalent to a meter on here. So when it stores the distance in here, internally it actually stores it as a meter value. All right, but you have the ability to set the parameters that says, no, I want you to tell me that it's not meters. I want you to tell me it's feet. So that's what this is about. You can have it set up and have multiple different types of units in the same data set. But here's the basic units. I can then go to angles, and I can say, I wish this to be degrees, minutes, and seconds on here. Area units, I don't want square feet, I want to do acres. Location units, I want to go and set to DMS also. Direction units, I want to go to quadrant bearings. Okay, so those are the core settings that you want to set before you start editing anything. You want that to be reflected back to you. All right, please make sure you do that. It will solve a lot of problems as you're moving forward, because the reality is a lot of this is changing in the background. changing to the point like, and again, I'm going to go a little deep dive here, the angular units, when it stores it, it actually stores it as a number on here, so that it's actually storing it as a north azimuth number for that direction that it's storing it. It's reflecting back to you by how you tell it you want it to be reflected back. Whether you want it to be quadrant bearings, whether you want it to be decimal degrees, whatever you want it to be, that's what it's going to report it back to you. And the closest I can say that to sort of help you come over this concept is that it's much like Excel, the Excel spreadsheet, Microsoft Excel. It stores all of those values in there as number fields, but you tell it what the format is to get reported back to you, whether it's currency or whether it's a percentage or whether it's got X number of decimal places on it. But it's only storing one value on there. And these units, again, Nancy, you're correct, they're stored with this project on here. Okay? So there's the units. That's the first thing I always tell you. When you're starting up ArcGIS Pro, you can make your connection, you can load data in, but make sure you set your units before you do anything else. All right. So the rest of this stuff, let's sort of go down through this because there's a whole lot of settings inside this options. They sort of took all the options they had, viewing options and editing options and all sorts of options, and threw them all in one place. And now you navigate them and do everything in one place. The first
Frank,
one,
before you move further into the settings, there is a question in the chat. Is it possible to open a QGIS project file in Pro, or for that matter, into ArcMap?
I don't know. I don't know. Thank you for those of us who are open source. No, I don't know. I don't know. I've never tried it. Never tried it. I'm not sure whether or not, I'm not sure. It's a good question. It's a good question. I don't know.
I've got my open source guide, Frank. I'll have him run a test for me.
Okay. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah. It's a great question. I'm an SU business partner, so you won't find QGIS on this machine anywhere. You won't find it. But that's a great question. Okay, so let's go more with this. Options. So one of the things that's interesting is that if I click on the application general, there's, when you start ArcGIS, what do you want to show it? And what about projects? Where do you want the projects? I usually don't touch any of these, but this one here, the application theme, you can flip between a light theme or a dark theme. I wish there was something in the middle, but it's either bright white or darker charcoal gray. All right. White is good during the day. The dark is actually good at night, or if you have low lighting around, so you don't get this white light blasting at you. When I'm making presentations, I usually will use light instead of dark, only because some people have a problem seeing dark if they're in certain types of settings. Let me ask, Chris, what setting do you use?
Dark mode. I use the dark mode.
Yeah. It just depends on where you're sitting and what you're working on and such on there. So, by the way, if you flip this, it will tell you have to restart ArcGIS Pro for that to take effect on there. All right. So no matter what, if you change that setting anywhere, it says you have to restart it to take effect. I don't care about that because I'm not going to restart. So let's go down through a couple other things here. There's all sorts of settings in here. I mean, we could do deep dives into all of this, but let's just go over to the editing in here because this series is sort of focused on editing inside of here. So there's some settings in here that I want to hold off on describing till I actually show it to you in the interface. There's a thing called dynamic constraints, and I'll show you what they look like. I tend to keep them off. Double click is a shortcut for the finish. Yeah, that was always the standard, and ArcMap will keep it in there. Whether or not you have a touch screen, whether you want to stretch geometry proportionate when moving a vertex. I've kind of always struggled to understand why you would do that, but I usually keep it off. Stretch topology proportionally, same thing. Feature symbology in a sketch. So when I'm drawing, for example, a polygon, and I draw the sketch, if I have that clicked on, it will fill in the portions that form a closed polygon. I tend to not like that, only because it becomes distracting for me on here. Editing toolbar. You now have a floating editing toolbar inside of Pro that by default is at the bottom and it's a medium size. I actually usually like it over on the left-hand side of my area, and I make it small. There's also magnifying on here. Warning if you change a subtype, that's fine. Let's get down to the editing. So inside of here, all right, inside of here, inside of ArcGIS Pro, you now have the ability to automatically have it save your edits. And if you do that, it can allow you to automatically save it on a time interval, every X number of minutes, or on every number of operations. All right. I would say be careful with this unless you go and tell it that you also want to confirm the save edits. All right. Because if you turn this off and turn this on, as we did when we first started with this, you would be editing and editing and editing, and once that interval went, it would automatically save without even notifying you that it was saving. And so that you'd be doing a lot of editing and you'd want to undo something and you couldn't go back past what had been saved. And we found out that it wound up working against us several times. So we actually don't automatically save, but that we will in fact say, go ahead and do this. Actually, the way I recommend it is that save my edits when I save my project. So every time I save my project, it's automatically save the edits. I normally don't need to confirm when I save my edits because that's something I explicitly am doing. Deactivate any editing tool. I've not found that. Make newly edited layers editable by default. And we'll talk about what is editable now. All right. As we get back into here. So this is how I usually go and set it up. This has to do with SDE versioning and branch versioning on here. So I'm just going to go and hit OK. By the way, just to let you know, there are settings for geoprocessing and sharing and sort of publishing this and raster and display and layout and CAD and interface. At the bottom here, there's the customize elements where you can actually customize the ribbon, you can customize the quick access. I'm not going to do any of that with this session, but I'm going to go back to ArcGIS Pro. All right, any questions with that? Like I said, you could do a deep dive just into those options that are in there. There's an awful lot in there. Those are the ones that I think are most important. Go ahead, Nancy.
There's some terminology here that we just want to make sure everybody's good with, and you all probably are, and it's probably just me. It's a little bit slow on the uptake here, but of course I'm moving on my screen. Brian can't see me. This where he has his highlight, you see project map, all those sorts of things, and underneath that is the ribbon. That's when we talk about the ribbon, that's what we're talking about. So Frank goes over here and clicks on analysis, for example, then instead of view. So if you were to click under analysis, then that ribbon will change, and then you can get access to different things in the ribbon. So finding the tools in ArcMap, you found them in a certain way. They're all here. You just have to find them, right? You just need to know which ribbon they're in.
And I'm going to try to give
and then
you
the other
some hints on where to find them. Yes.
Yeah, and that's what he's going to kind of familiarize us with. And then the pane, you can see, just notice that they're stacked. So just like they did in ArcMap, they're stacked down there at the bottom so he can flip between them as he needs to. And he calls that the pane. And then we still have the table of contents like we did before that you can turn on and off if you need more space. And then you have your map document in the middle there.
Right. So this is a map
That's all. I
document.
just want to make sure everybody's familiar with the geography. Yeah.
Right.
And there are things that you can stack on that too. Sometimes I've ended up with a catalog view. If you're not seeing what you're looking for, look around because it's probably stacked someplace.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. The other thing is that since you set up earlier, where do they display on the map? Okay. So Mike just asked a question I saw. So Mike, the units are actually right now they're showing in my coordinates down here on here. They also do not show up until I do things with some of the editing, for example. So to give you a metaphor or an analogy on why you set those, previously in ArcMap, when you were doing parcel mapping and you went to use the traverse tool, by default, ESRI always set it up to be decimal degrees with polar direction, all right, using polar bearings. And it was always problematic because somebody would go and they would start editing and pull up the traverse field and the dialog box in there, and they'd go to put in their direction or their bearing, and it wouldn't take it because they were inputting it as quadrant bearing. And in fact, ESRI had set the unit to be polar directions. And so what we just did with those settings is set it up correctly. It is the same as what you used to have to do with ArcMap under the edit options. You had to set those up there, and they don't show up until you actually get to use those tools. All right, so I set those settings up, those units up for using them for parcel editing on here. I'm going to set up quadrant bearings in feet and such. All right. Okay, so panes. By the way, ESRI says these are PANES. And during this early transition, I used to call them PAINS. All right, they were panes. I still struggle getting used to this. We had them in ArcMap, but they act differently here. They are still dockable. I mean, so I can take, for example, this geoprocessing pane, and I can take it by the tab, and I can go and say, put it over here. All right, and if I unpin it, it will disappear and be over here. All right. And it works pretty much the same, but it looks a little differently. And so I want to put it here on top of this. So I put it in the button and do this. You will see when we start doing any geoprocessing tool or anything like that, why I struggle with it. It turns out that with ArcMap, and we'll get into another one of those differences between ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro. With ArcMap, ESRI embedded the code inside the interface elements, all right? Which meant that if I were to go and open up, for example, let's go to this sample parcels and right click and say, open up my attribute table. I would open up the attribute table, and then I could go in here and I could say, let's go and right click and say, calculate a field. In ArcMap, it would open up what was called a modal dialog box, a nice little dialog box, allow me to go and put the elements in there and run right here. Not so in Pro. In Pro, when I click this, it opens up the geoprocessing tool to calculate the field. All right, that's what it's doing, so that now that one command is no longer fired off on the interface. It's fired off by calling literally the Python script, the geoprocessing tool, to do this. Now, whether you noticed it or not, this actually occurred back in ArcMap 10. there was a huge change from ArcMap 9 to ArcMap 10 in that they rewrote all of the programs so that it no longer ran off of a set of tools that were embedded in the interface. Rather, the code was now taken out of the interface, moved over to a set of scripts, Python scripts, and every time you would go right click and say calculate, it would fire this thing off, but it kind of looked the same before. It doesn't look that way anymore. It now calls up that script, opens up that geoprocessing tool, and you then go and put it in there. My problem is that the button to actually start this thing is always at the very bottom, okay? And it requires retraining your brain, that you can't just input this and say, click OK. You actually have to hit that button for it to work. Always, you have to hit that button for it to go and do whatever you're looking for. Because this is a script, this is no longer embedded code in the interface. All right, sorry, that's actually one of my, I wish they had changed this, but they didn't.
That's a big adjustment to remember to hit the run. So.
Huge, and I find myself still trying to be productive and doing that, and then suddenly going, oh, I didn't even hit the run button yet, and you have to wait for that. And it's things that you do all the time that it becomes most evident on. Now again, eventually I will rewire my brain and allow me to go and get used to doing it that way. I will eventually forget ArcMap. You know, it's like your first girlfriend. You never really forget her, but she's not as important anymore, right? Right? So it's the same sort of thing. Eventually you'll sort of move on from that. But at the moment, you still sort of long for that every once in a while. All right, so let's look at this ribbon interface, all right? Again, the project brings us over to these options. And again, there's a lot in here, especially in these options. Licensing, what portals you're connected to. If you're connected to portals, you'll see new project, open a project, save as a project on there. That's all in the project area. And then as we go across, there are map. The map area, this is where a lot of the tools that used to sort of be spread out on the standard element are gathered together. And you will see cut, copy, paste, and paste special in here. Once we have something, they're all in here, but they're also located in a couple other tabs. So by the way, this is the tab. This from here to here is this here, the clipboard, that's a grouping. The navigate is a grouping. This layer is a grouping. So they sort of group these elements together on the map element. Let's look at the Explorer. The Explorer serves a couple different purposes now. All right. The Explore tool is the Identify tool. If I go and click Explore and then click on something, it actually will, well, actually have it set.
You have no pop-ups enabled.
Yeah, thank you. So I could go and say, okay, there it is. So there's my Explore. This is the Identify tool. Okay, on here.
I can't tell you how long I looked for the Identify tool, though, Frank. That's good to know where it is.
I know. Well, okay, so let's sort of show you a little bit more about this. This Identify tool, okay? This Identify tool is actually a combination of the old HTML Identify or old HTML pop-up and the Identify tool, so that if I look at here to configure the pop-up on this, says, okay, it's going to be your fields. And if I click on this, it may not be every field in here. Depends upon the structure of your data. Sometimes most of those fields aren't shown, so that maybe I don't want to see these fields here. All right, maybe I don't want to see these fields here. I can go and click on that and configure that in place. All right, now when I go, let's get this back here. Now when I go here and do a pop-up, Suddenly on this, there are fields that aren't showing up. So if you go and click on the Explore tool, and it gives you the pop-up and you're not seeing all your fields, it's like, what happened to these fields? They're not here anymore. You have to go in and configure that pop-up, all right, on there. And again, this shows you what it is. You can then click on this and show it you want to go and do all the fields in here, and then configure it off, and you can go back here to here. Again, there it is. All right. Which brings up another thing. That's similar to the way ArcGIS Online works now, in that it has this identify tool, which is really nothing more than a pop-up, right? It just pops these things up and says, okay, here's the way you're going to look at it. But what that means is that you can now begin to really customize that pop-up. You can do things that you could do, for example, on ArcGIS Online. You could include it to visually show images if you've got attachments or images associated with it. You can use Arcade, which is another deep dive. Arcade is a scripting language so that you can use it to actually do calculations. You can use it to customize exactly what you see in that pop-up. This is, again, a combination of an identify and an HTML pop-up configuration, all in Explore now. Okay, that's the first two. The next thing is, if I go and move my cursor over it, it shows me I can also use this for panning around. All right, with my left button, I can do pop-ups. With my middle button, I can zoom and rotate. And with the right button, I can zoom continuously. So I can go here and zoom in, just moving my scroll wheel right now. I can go and hit my right button and pull that up, or I can do display in and out. So I can also go and, let me see here, I can pan around. I can tell you that I know Chris and I, when we try to help one another, we always have a problem because his zoom is set up differently than mine. He's gone and configured it so
I
that
still
his
use the
keyboard.
C key.
Yeah, so another option is that if you look at your keyboard, the lower left three keys are the Z, the X, and the C. So the Z allows you to zoom in, and as I'm holding it down, allows me to zoom in, right? The X allows me to zoom out, and the C allows me to pan. So as I hold them down. So these younger guys, they're used to playing video games and holding the different buttons down, and that's the way they manipulate and use it. So, all right. So that's Explore. Again, I personally, because I don't use, we tend to edit a lot of data and we don't look at the final configurations. But I usually go and set this up to just don't do pop-ups. I don't care about those. Don't do pop-ups. And I'll just go and use this for manipulation instead. As we move across here, this is full extent. This is extent of a layer. This is zoom in, zoom out, fix, zoom in, previous, next on here. We also have bookmarks. All right, I actually like these bookmarks. They allow you to, it works the same as it used to be. You create a bookmark, you can go and manage it. You can reset the extent of them. They've done some nice changes in here. You can actually export out your bookmarks and import them in later. There's actually some nice elements in here. Go to XY is here under the map. Changing your base maps, you can change them here. And again, I'm already logged in, so it just gives me access to whatever base maps I have, whether they be ArcGIS Online or whether they be enterprise base maps. Add data is here. Add preset data if I have a certain type of presets on here. I don't use that much. Select. Let's talk about select. Okay. I'm still not sure why, but this will be the most frustrating part. I think this will be one of the most frustrating parts you do, because they have changed the way you do selects inside of ArcGIS Pro. You can still set it up so that you have sort of the rectangle select, and I draw a rectangle around things, all right? And it will select anything that is selectable that intersected with that rectangle. However, to unselect, I no longer can hold the shift key down. A shift key means add to my selection, all right? If I wish to unselect things, I now have to hold down the control key to unselect from inside of those. All right. I've talked to them about it and not gotten a great explanation of why they made that major interface change, other than my thought is that they may be doing this for some of the HTML implementations of the software that's happening in the future, and handling it that way. You will get used to that. Again, it's just one of those things you want to be aware of. So you can hit rectangle, new selection each time. And those of us, by the way, that used to use ArcInfo, yeah, this is make a selection. This is the shift key is add a selection, and the control key is remove from the selection. So you had A selects, N selects, R selects, those sorts of things. Same sort of thing. All right. All right. So those are selections in here. Select by attributes. The select by attributes, again, let me open up my attribute table, is not here anymore. It's not, they don't have a separate select by attribute on the attribute table. It's actually a separate, again, geoprocessing tool that fires off to do a select by attributes. Okay. I curse them a little bit about this. It's like, that's one of the most important things you have here, and now you have to fire off a script to do that, but it's there. That's how it is. It's actually pretty nice the way they have it now, where you can build your selection query. GT is equal to this, and it's actually very fast to read this on here because it's pre-reading a lot of these values in here for you. All right, adding a new one where this is not equal to, it is not null. So it's, and you can do your inverse right here on here. It's actually not bad. It's nice when you have that in place now to go and do this. It's there. All right.
The main advantage to that, I also am not adjusting to this one well, but I did notice you can save it.
Yes.
So if you're doing a lot of repeat edits and you want to find all the places you have not updated yet, search where create by is null or something, it is useful to be able to just recall the select by attributes.
So Nancy, just sort of to let you know, at 2.5, one of the changes, they took some of our recommendations, is that down you actually have a history tab now, which lists all of the geoprocessing tools that you used. So if in fact you're doing the same thing over and over, you can quickly click on, oh, here's where I did a select by attributes, and then I did a calculate. Then I did a select by attributes, and I did a calculate. So you can pull up the history, make little tweaks to the parameters, and rerun it again. So the history now shows you all of that you did. All right. And again, that's a separate pane. Yeah, that is a nice pane on there, to help you on that. Select by attribute. Select by location is the same as it always was. It is a separate pane, though. Again, you want to make sure you understand that. Attributes, if I go and select something here, on here, your attributes are basically the same. However, there is a new addition inside of here, in that it allows you to auto apply any changes, so you don't have to click apply every time. so that if, for example, I were going and taking auto apply and I change this from 29 to 30, as soon as I hit return, it's automatically changed back there without me having to hit apply. Again, it depends upon how you edit things, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. For us, it's actually very nice to be able to do that without having to hit apply every time. Okay, that's attributes on here. Measure. Measures is actually, I like the way it works. Locate. Locate. So locate is different. This is sort of the find command. Okay. Now it comes preloaded with XY provider and world geocoding services, but you don't have to use them. You can uncheck them and they are no longer available. But what you now can do is set it up specifically for the layers that you have and say, I want to go and enable it. I want to add a layer, and let's just do sections here. All right. And then maybe I want it to be this contains instead of equals, contains. All right. And I can actually say, make that the first choice on here. So I now have set up that my find command is automatically set up so that if I go in here and type 29, it now very quickly goes and works through all of those fields and figures out what I had in there and will do complete searches for me. A really nice improvement, your ability to go in and locate, and you can tell it to just stop on the first one or go all the way through and search through them. So you can now customize the locate command, which used to be the find command, and it works exactly as it did before. You can zoom, you can pan, you can show the details, you can add it to your selection. This is a nice improvement. Okay. These are just labeling, you know, label management and such on here. So this was all on the map tab for you. All right, let's look at the insert tab. The insert tab is, for example, if I were to want another map, I could insert another map in here. I can have multiple maps inside of this project. All right, so I could actually have multiple data sets that I'm working on or different ways of viewing on it. I can insert that. Same way, if I were doing a printed map, I could have multiple layouts on there. I could have a single layout, or like in this case, I have no layouts because I'm not going to do a map. I'm just going to edit data on here. All right. Maps, views, toolboxes, things, a folder. Yeah, I don't do a whole lot with the insert, but that's to insert elements in here. Analysis tab. This is where you get things such as your ability to see the history pane that I just showed you. That's over on the analysis tab. History, Python model builder, your environments for geoprocessing, your tools. If I want to see my geoprocessing pane, again, as I scroll over, it says show the geoprocessing pane. So there's my geoprocessing pane. Here's the things that I've used recently. Here is my toolbox, my complete access to all the tools that are in here. Or if I have something on the portal, I might have automatic portal tools that are available to me. Again, that is the geoprocessing pane. All right, and that is set up by clicking this button here under the analysis. Other feature analysis, these are some standard types of analysis that you've got for most of what we're dealing with as far as editing. You're not going to pay much attention to it, but they're there. The view tab. The view tab is when, for example, you want to reset the panes to go on there. If you want to take a map document and convert it back and forth to a 2D or 3D map, it's here. You can link views between different map views so that as you move one, it also moves the other one. If you want a catalog pane, catalog view. What's the difference here? A catalog pane moves it over on the side here. A catalog view puts it right over here in the view. This is a view. This is a pane. All right. When you click on the wrong one, it's a pane, no matter what you do. So again, pane, view, pane, view. This is your contents, your table of contents pane. Putting up here, this is your geoprocessing pane again. Python tasks. Tasks. Here's a series of tasks in here. Tasks are predefined, repeatable commands or elements that you do. There's, as you comes out with some of them, especially for the parcel fabric, there's some tasks in there, predefined tasks. You can write your own. Again, think of it as Excel's macro recorder on there. Workflow manager, thumbnails, yeah, don't do much on there. Edit. Cut, copy, paste, there's your clipboard. There's save and discard. So if I go in here and decide to go and really destroy this and just go and edit something here, all right? I went and edited it. I actually now have the ability to go and undo those things, but I can undo more than just the modify feature, which I did. I could also go and undo the interface things that I did. For example, updating the pop-up that I did here. And you can see not just the edits, but also the changes to the interface. So if I go in here and do a change in the symbology, and oh, that was a mistake, I can undo that change by using the undo and the redo here. I like what they've done here. They've made some nice changes in here on that. Create, this is your create features. This pops up your feature templates for editing on here. All right, so that if I want to create a new section here, it gives me, here's the tools that I have to go and create that. Double click, I'm done with that.
But the biggest change here is that you didn't have to start editing.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Thank
You just
you, Nancy.
click on this.
So let's talk about that because that is an interesting. Thank you, Nancy. I'd forgotten. I had that on list of questions and I actually went right past that. Let's go back because I started focusing on the ribbon. Let's focus on the table of contents for a minute. This dramatic change over here. All right. Table of contents. We still have the traditional list by what used to be list by display or list by drawing order. It works exactly the same. You can turn things off, you can turn things on, you can select multiple things and group them, you can ungroup them. It works exactly the same as it always has. All right, that's the same. List by data source works exactly the same. If you're working with web services, if you're working with SDE, it will show you what version you're working in, such. The next button over here is list by selection. This is what is selectable, all right? And I can turn it on and say that this thing should not be selectable, ever. So it will not be selectable. I also have this tab. This next tab is edits. By default, you are constantly editing things. You are always editing things, okay? You are always editing things. One more time, you are always editing things. Be aware of that, okay? So if by mistake you go and select something and drag it, you have moved it. So how do you prevent somebody from editing it? You just set their project file and say, nope, you can't edit those two layers. You can see them, you can trace them, you can snap to them, but you cannot edit them. And when we do that, again, I can go and do this, and it will allow me to go and edit that, but it will not allow me to edit anything else in there. All right, only the layers that are set to be editable on here. So again, one of the big things that Nancy pointed out is the fact that I didn't have to start editing. I didn't have to set my target layer, the tool that I'm going to use. That's really what the feature templates are for. These feature templates have been set up where, in this case, it goes according to whatever I have symbolized in here. And okay, here's the symbolization, here's the tools that you're using, so it automatically sets it up. There will be a deep dive in setting this up further so that you set up your templates correctly for what you're going to do, so you have a multitude of templates to edit against. I can share with you this, that ArcGIS Pro has got some amazing elements in here where you can set up what's called group templates. So for a parcel editor, all right, I can set it up so that I can put I can draw a polygon and have it automatically create the lines for that polygon and automatically create corners at the ends of each of those lines. All right, I can set that up just by setting up a template correctly for it. So there is what's called a group template on here. It is a really nice feature they've built in here. And that, by the way, is here when we go to manage templates. It allows us to go and take a template and edit it and set the properties on it. And again, that's a deep dive there to go and do that. So templates are important. That is editing, list by editing. And then we have list by selection or snapping. What's it going to snap to on here? All right. What's it going to snap to? If you can see it and it's set to be snappable, you will snap to it. You can say, no, I don't want to snap to these things, and it will no longer snap to them. Finally, we have list by labeling. Here is your old label manager that used to be on a separate toolbar. It's here now. So now I can say, go ahead and label this thing, and it will label them. It will label these. All right, it will label these. I can also go in here to this class and say label properties, and it will bring up all of my parameters for setting up my labels. This looks a little weird, doesn't it? What the heck is that? What is that? Well, it turns out that that is in fact Arcade scripting language. Arcade is an object-oriented scripting language that allows you to go and do some pretty amazing things. That's the labeling expressions now are now Arcade expressions on here. All right. So here's the table of contents. Again, the important thing is you are always editing. If you have edit rights, you automatically are editing on here. You don't have to turn it on. You don't have to turn it off. You do have to save your edits. All right. It doesn't automatically save unless you have set that up to automatically do saving on here. Okay. So here's attributes. We went over that. Here's your tools in here for editing. Actually, you can change. Here's really all your tools in here. You can change the gallery size. This is called the tool gallery. You can change the size, or you can tell it to show me all of the tools on a pane. That's what this is here. Here's all the tools I have available. Everything from topography to topology, Kogo, all attribute tools. Here's all your tools in here. And again, I can change whether it's large icons or small icons, or it puts it in a list. I can change the way I want to go and view these things.
Can you customize the order in which you see the tools in the gallery?
Okay, I'm going to ask you, Nancy, go ahead.
I was going to have you go through it one more time, but the question was, can you modify the order? Because being able to see these is really critical. So let's go through that one more time and then show if you can reorder them.
Yes. Okay. So let's start one more time. Let's close out our that's called, by the way, all tools is actually called modify features pane. You have everything in here. All right. So this is the tool gallery. And by default, it shows you just sort of the limit. It depends upon what else you have in here. By the way, this is my customized area in here, because these are the things that I use all the time. I use a tool called Align Features. I use a measurement tool. I use Save, Undo, Redo. I use my Save My Project, my Delete, Select by Attributes. Again, I put it up here so I don't have to go to the map all the time. I have my bookmarks here, Next, Extent, Zoom to Extend, Previous. Those are my customizations that I put in here. So this is the tool gallery. The size of it is dependent upon whether you have other customizations or what you set it for. If you click on this button here, it allows you to change the size here in case you want to see more. It also allows you to go and switch to say, show me a pane that contains everything on here. All right, everything on here. And again, I can change what it looks like. I also have the ability to group it by function or just give me a list. I still can't handle that. I just can't handle that. That's at least group it by function for me on here. I can set up my own tools if I want for my favorites, or I can just use all of them. So Chris asked me a question about how do I customize that, because virtually you can customize almost everything on this interface on here. So let's say I wanted to create a new toolbar that had a couple tools on it. Where I would do that is I would go to Project, and again, this is sort of another deep dive, but I would go to Projects and Objects, and then I would go down to the bottom and say, customize the ribbon on here. All right. So here are the main tabs. Now, by default, if you look at this, there's a whole lot more tabs than you think are showing up all the time. All right, because they're hiding some of them depending upon what you're doing and where you're at. And I can tell you the edit tool is here. So if I look at the edit tool, I have my clipboard group. I have my manage my edit group. I have snappy group. I have features. I have selection group. I have tools, and I have my corrections group. Those are the various sections of the tab that are going in here. And if I look at the tools group, I have my editor tool gallery, which has them all in there. And then I have, these are the tools that I have thrown up here on here. So let's just, as an example, say, let us create a new tab. All right. And let's just call this the training. It would help if I would click on here and rename that. The training. All right. And I could go and move this thing up if I wanted. I'll keep it at the end here. And now I can actually start moving tools into that. And here's a list of the tabs, but I want to go to the commands. What do I want to do with this? And here is literally all the commands that are inside of ArcMap. All right. So let's just do a simple one. Maybe I want to do saves. All right. I want to save my edits. Oh, maybe that's not it. Save my edits. Okay. So I tell it that inside this new group, I want to take and add my save edits on here. And there it is there. When I click OK, all right, I let it go and store this, go back over here. And when I click on, where did I put that thing? It's under edit.
Training, next to appearance.
Thank you. Thank you. There it is there. Thank you. All right, so I've created my own toolbar and put training in there. And I didn't rename my group. Remember, my group is a collection of commands that it separates in here. Here is my clipboard group, my manage edits group, my snapping group, such. So when I go here, here's my group. So I can create my own ribbon inside of this with just the commands that I'm going to work with all the time. Right? Not tough.
So for the parcel editing, like in New Mexico, one of the things might be useful as a group when they get together would be to come up with maybe a PLSS editing toolbar, and then all of the tools you would use to update your PLSS could be on there. And anytime you're going to make the PLSS editable, you'd go to that ribbon, and those would be all the tools you'd need to do that. I mean,
Exactly.
this customization is going to make it a lot easier to teach people how to do the edits we want them to do, correct?
Yeah. Interestingly, though, it sort of works against us as consultants, because when we've done customization to our toolbar and we show it to somebody, they're like, well, mine doesn't look like that at all. And then you tell them, well, the customization, you got to go and customize it and such, and it becomes a little problematic for it. But you're right. If you're inside of a group, if you've got set functionality that you're always going to do, that's a really good way of doing it. Go and assign and create sort of your own toolbar for what you're doing. All right. Let me go and delete that just so it doesn't become down here.
So in the chat, Mark wants to know if you can share those customizations. Can you send them to other people?
You can. They are stored down at the system level, but you can go and actually do that. That's a really, really deep dive. We might have to go and do that at one time to go and show you how to do that real quickly. It is, no, not in there.
So the short answer is yes. The long answer is it's pretty complicated.
Yeah, it is not simple. It's actually shared over here in a configuration file inside of here. Yeah. Short answer is yes. You're right, Nancy. Exactly. It is a little bit more complicated. It's not as simple as just exporting them out and saying, go ahead and do this and do that. But you can go and share those back and forth between you. Yeah. All right. Let's go through let's try to see if we can finish the tabs. Here's your on here. By the way, this is the other default one. It's ground to grid in here. Imagery. Here's how you deal with the imagery. Sharing. This is how you basically publish this. By the way, it's not just sharing. It is going and publishing it. For example, publishing it up to ArcGIS Online or publishing it out to a portal. It is saving web layers, saving layer files. The sharing is about taking and exporting things, exporting a map out. This is the whole thing. Sharing, for example, even the ArcGIS solutions, you can actually go and share those as part of this. Data Assistant actually is also part of the deployment solution. Really nice tool in here, on here. All right. Oh, 20 up. We're getting close to this. So, by the way, you can see we're going to have a whole lot of these things in place. So let me show you a couple of little things that will intrigue you. And I know that when Nancy saw it, she was like, what? So yes. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to go back here and I'm going to focus on just these. All right. This is one layer. And I'm going to look at the symbology for this layer and show you some of the little tricks on here that are in ArcGIS Pro that are not in Map. So if I click on this right now and I go to symbology, right click and go to symbology, here it is. It's a single symbol. But I can click on that and here's a gallery of predefined extents on here. I want to dig down. I want to go into properties and I want to go and click on these. Here's the various elements of this symbology. And I have the exterior, the outline of the polygon, and the interior of the polygon. So I go in here and just quickly say, okay, I want to go and change this to whatever on here. I actually, if I click on this, can go to color properties and tell it a transparency specifically for this one color if I wish, and do that. I could also change that on appearances, but it's slightly different. But here's the thing that I want to do. If I go all the way down, not to the symbols, not to the layers of that symbol, but to the actual structure of that, I can go in here and I can tell it, I want to add, besides the outline and besides the fill, I want to add a new symbol layer. I want to create a marker layer. All right. So that means that as it's drawing it, it's also going to draw markers at certain locations for me. So inside of here, I'm going to go and I'm going to tell it, all right, I'm going to make these markers red, and I'm going to make them, let's put 5 points. But if I scroll down further, I can see that I have marker placement, and I can tell it not to fill this polygon with that, but rather to put it at the vertices on here. All right, let me go back here. This is still 10. And I can click there. And it now will show me every single vertex on the perimeter of that polygon. So I can go in here and see, oh, look at this. What I thought was just a straight line is actually has been split up. Same way here has been split up. Some of these appear to be logical, some are not. And then I can also zoom in further and say, oh, wait a minute, look at this. When this intersection occurred, there actually is an extra vertex inside of here. So this additional capability to go and look at vertices inside of or on the perimeter of the polygon is really important when you want to do things like cleaning up the data. When you're looking to see, okay, where are the vertices? Does it have extra vertices on here? Does it not have extra vertices on here? What's going on in here? And it allows you to go and do that. All right, that is again ArcGIS Pro, and it allows me to create a new marker set inside the structure, and then it allows me to go and symbolize it inside of the layer element on here. And then apply that, and there it is. So let's go back here to contents. There it is there. Yeah. All right. So I will show you one more thing, and then I'm going to stop for the day and let you open it up to questions. So I'm going to go to modify. So let me show you one of the really cool tools in here. There's a tool called Align Features. Align Features tool allows you to redefine geometries by drawing a sketch, what used to be called sketch. All right, so I can tell it to go, and this tolerance is sort of a buffer, and it's going to look for vertices outside that buffer. And I can go in here and say, let's do a 5-foot buffer in here. All right, 5-foot buffer. By the way, did you remember that I told it to put my editing toolbar on the left-hand side and make it small? There it is there. And then here's some methods. In this case, I wanted to fit those shapes to the path. I want to do it on both sides, and let's make the ends square. And I can go in here and say, take any vertex that is within 5 foot of that line that I just drew, go ahead and make it on the line. And if it's part of a polygon shape, to just remove it. Yeah. Move the vertices. Oh, I got a couple nices. You see, I was wondering how long it was going to be before I got those. Yes. Yes. That is so nice. You know, I have to share with you, that was one reason why we started using ArcGIS Pro back at 2.2, because we had found how to go and symbolize and look at these vertices, and then how to start cleaning them up so that we could go and clean up for some of our data. So again, you're now able to go and say, okay, well, let's take and clean up this data and do it that way. So let's go and, let's symbolize this one again. I'm going to structurally add a new marker on here. I'm going to go and symbolize that and make that green, and I'm going to symbolize it at 5 point and put that on my vertices. All right. So now I can see that I have these things misaligning. All right. Now let's go back to modify, and I know that my 5 foot is not going to work well in here, but let's go and draw and say, let's say I have to go and I could just do straight lines in here, but I'm going to do more. All right. And again, this is probably 50 feet at least. Now it's even more than that. I'm exaggerating this. Let's be careful there, because if I take that one, it's going to move it over.
Yeah, you're going to grab that one.
Yeah. Let's say 100. Nope. Let's try to do 80. 80 is fine. All right. So it will now go and take and align those all up inside of there. One single line. It took, not just did it work on this layer, but it worked on any layer that is editable and selectable that I can see. All right, so I can, again, if I were doing this, I could say go ahead and align all of those in there and clean up all of that data. So if I have vertical alignment issues between specific layers, I could go in there and tell it, this is where I want these lines to be, whether I define them by coordinate values or whether I want them by to coincide with something else. And if it is displayable, and it doesn't matter how many layers you have shown there, it will go and make sure that every single feature that's within that boundary goes and now replaces its existing geometry with that new geometry. All right. Okay.
But
So
if you
this is
wanted
an
to leave your
amazing tool.
PLSS,
Go ahead.
Go for it, Nancy.
Go ahead, Nancy.
I'm just going to say it's an amazing tool, and you could set your PLSS so it was uneditable, so you didn't accidentally, do something wrong with it. But
Took the words right out of my
it's an
mouth.
amazing tool.
Yeah, you could
An
take your
amazing
parcel
tool.
layers, move them over to it. You could take any other ancillary layers, whether it be zoning layers, whether it be whatever, to make sure they are all in compliance with that layer that you're using as sort of your template, and bring them over and do that. Now, again, all it's doing is just stretching and moving those vertices over, but that may be all you need on here. All right.
But if you've ever tried to align a zoning layer to a parcel layer, though, and have to do those little link adjust things that drive you out of your mind, this is a game changer.
Yes. Yes. And I have to go and applaud Nancy for recognizing it for what it is. I mean, like I said, we've been doing this for a couple of years, and I'm surprised ESRI's never told anybody about this. And we thought, well, maybe we're just weird that we recognize the value of this, but it's pretty amazing what it does. Again, I look in here and it's like, well, maybe this is supposed to be aligned here like that. Boom, there they are. All right, I can go in and do this. Yeah, it's the tools. And so the reason you can do that And by the way, that tool is actually in ArcMap, but in order to use it in ArcMap, you have to make a selection set that it works against. Well, inside of ArcGIS Pro, on many of the tools, you have at the very bottom, you have an option that says, allow me to go and use this tool without having a selection. So if I can go and see it, if I can edit it, I can go and work against it so that at the time, from an editing standpoint, I can now work super efficiently. I can work on multiple layers at the same time, and not have to go through and select and edit and save and then select and edit and save. No, I can go in through and do this all at once, make sure they're all coincident, make sure that they are cleaned up where they should be, and be done with that. All right.
But you know what? I'm going to take it one step further. If we had our data hosted on a cloud environment, cloud being just not here, but it's some sort of shared editing environment, maybe it's enterprise, maybe it's ArcGIS Online, I could be editing in an area, Frank could be editing in an area, Dennis could be editing in an area, and we can all be hitting against the same database.
Yes. Yes.
To me, that's just astounding.
Yes. Yeah. That's where the real power of not just Pro, again, the edited tools in Pro, they've done a really good job on it. As much as I complain about it sometimes, they've done a really good job on reevaluating what these things are and how you edit them and what you do with them. This is a really nice improvement. And I can tell Kelly and some of these other people, they're sort of fed up with me constantly saying this. Why aren't you using Pro? Because they're so much better in Pro. Granted, the fabric, you have to transition to the structure, but when you put in the power of being able to go and work against web services from no matter where you're at, that's when it brings it up to a whole new level. Yes.
Well, and there's a couple other points to emphasize here, and that is that the parcel editing tools are going to be usable within the ArcGIS Pro fabric. So we're not going to have a separate set of tools for fabric versus a separate set of tools for parcel editing. So that will be useful. So,
yes.
And you'll also notice that the reason we called this the on-ramp is this is the tool I wanted Frank to really show us, but notice it took him a couple of hours to get us set up to the point to use it. So it's not the kind of thing where you just turn on Arc Pro and start aligning layers. There is an on-ramp. So just be cognizant of all those things Frank pointed out earlier about the setting up the options and understanding where your toolbars are and getting your layout. And you know what I mean? It's just like with any other tool, it's pretty powerful, but you can do a lot of damage in a short period of time.
You can. And I am going to also go and put in my pitch right now. It's always good to have a friend who's done this before, who knows what's important, what's not important. And that's one of the reasons why we decided to start having this seminar series, is to try to help people to understand this. And, you know, if you go and explore it on your own, you will eventually find these things. But some of us, we've been through the woods many times. We've got the paths well worn. We know where to go, where not to go. We've done this. So please, hopefully there's some value in these things, and there's value in having us help you and to show you how to go about this and what works, what doesn't work. I mean, there are just this little trick here, super powerful, but there's some techniques you need to know when you start dealing with curves and things of that sort. Right? So you just want to, again, have a friend who knows what they're doing on here. Okay, so we are getting close to our 2-hour limit. Let me open up and see if there's any. I even though I didn't intend to, I know I started talking a whole lot here. Sorry about that. I wanted to have more questions coming in, but I think that's what we're going to wind up doing here, is having this same sort of thing and scheduling it. So we've got a couple things we want to talk about. How soon should we schedule the next one? What day should it be? How long should it be? Okay, so let me go and unmute everybody that's in here right now, and let's talk about this. So what do you think? A, is there value in these things? Do you want us to share this with you, or do you want to just let you go and send you like Hansel and Gretel into the woods? Anybody?
Oh, there's absolutely value.
Yeah, okay. That was,
I learned a lot.
yeah. Thank you. Hopefully everybody learns something here. Pick something up here. Like I said, I want to start seeing if we do these more often. See if we can help everybody sort of understand this and do it. I'm unfortunately going to mute other people, mute everybody here. We got some speakerphone feedback on here. Sorry about that. And let's unmute you, Nancy. All right.
We do have some last minute questions in the chat if you want to address those
Please go ahead.
before we wrap up here. Mark wants to know, what is the best storage solution for parcel fabrics? Geodatabase, file geodatabase local, file geodatabase network. And then he said, if we decide to use ArcGIS Online, is there an easy way to create a script that will copy data from ArcGIS Online to the local file?
Okay.
Do you see that question?
So I can. The question as far as the Pro Parcel Fabric, if in fact you only have one editor, that's easy. You use a file geodatabase. If you're going to have more than one editor hitting against it, you have to go to a web service. And how you implement that, there's a whole spectrum of options on there. Everything from on-premises, where you have your own server, to Amazon Web Services, to Azure, I mean, there's a whole series of them. But by far, the easiest way to do it is with a file geodatabase with just one editor. Second question regarding the scripting of doing that. The interesting thing about this is that you don't need a script. So, for example, if I go in here to catalog and I go to portal, all right, this is my ArcGIS Online already. So if I wish to go in here, and I'm not going to go in and destroy anybody's data, but I actually have here's the parcels for one of our counties in here. It's loading it up. Let's go over here. Let's go and zoom over to there. It is not New Mexico. It is South Carolina. All right. And this is actually this setup here. It's got multiple parcels in here.
Not going to look very square, Frank.
I know. It's also got multiple feature classes in here. So inside of here, because of my ability, I'm actually editing it. It's telling me it's being projected on the fly because it's reprojecting it into the projection of my map into New Mexico. So it's saying, yeah, it's not editable right now because you reprojected it. If this was their standard, I actually would be able to edit it right on the fly. I don't have to do anything.
Okay.
If it's editable, it's there. It's mine. Nancy, go ahead.
East coordinate is like 1 trillion. The east coordinate is like 1,460 feet. Yeah.
Yeah. But Mark, just to let you know, once you move into Pro, the way you think about your data is very different because you don't think about storage, you think about access and edit rights on here. It is very different. So again, there is no script on there. I literally can go and just connect up to a web service, literally to a REST point, pull them into Pro and start editing them. And I'm editing them. I'm fine. I'm updating them as I go. So there is there, it is different the way you think about this as you're moving forward. Still can't get Pro Fabric up there on ArcGIS Online. You still have to have a server, but that may come sooner or later. Yeah. What other questions? Can you put an entire subdivision in
Right.
on a parent parcel? Ruben, let's hold that off until we actually get into parcels, or bring that up in the ArcGIS Pro Parcel Fabric forum. All right, if you don't mind. Do you have bandwidth to do it monthly? Actually, as I was talking in the very beginning, Larry, I would like to do some of this weekly, but alternate between these 4 different topics. So yes, I'm planning on doing this monthly for each specific topic, and it'll just be a different week for each of them. Yeah, we're going to do that. I do have to figure out kind of how we're going to do this. My thought is that that we just need to define what day it is. I can tell you that we've been holding the Panda Parcel Fabric Forum on Thursdays, which seems to be a good day. Nobody likes Monday. Nobody likes Friday. Thursday's a good one. We might continue with that, but I like somebody suggested we use SurveyMonkey to go and put that out. That might be a good suggestion to go and do that. So send out SurveyMonkey for the time of future meetings you'd like to cover. So let's do that. However, you have to subscribe to this so that I have your mailing list for SurveyMonkey. So please go to that link before you finish the meeting. Go to that link. Make sure that you've subscribed to as ever many of the Panda Bamboos as you want, and we'll make sure that we get you on there, and you'll be part of the SurveyMonkey. Thank you, Dennis. Been very informative. Yeah, thanks. Continuing attendees, thank you, Chris and Nancy.
Larry has a question. Is it safe to assume access to editing tools in Pro is the same as desktop?
Yes, there's pretty much 100% equivalency, and the levels of licensing is basically the same. Yeah, it is still basic, standard, advanced, and that's the way those tools are working. And you need to have standard or advanced to have access to topology and access to some of the more advanced elements, but that's a standard license. That's not a, basic. It's just sort of viewing, but you could do an awful lot. You could take ArcGIS Online and edit ArcGIS Online with basic. It's pretty amazing what you can do there. So, all right. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Chris, for helping with this.
No problem.
Oh, Javier says, where is the link again? Let's go and show you. I actually sent out, let's go in here. I had sent out this email, right? That hopefully you got this notice. And at the bottom of the notice is this. To subscribe, and you'll go and do that. There's also another alternate on here. If you go to pandaconsulting.com, all right, pandaconsulting.com, welcome to Panda Consulting. It will tell you a little bit about us, tell you about where we got our name. And then go to Panda Parcel Fabric Forum. And on that page at the end, at the very bottom says sign me up. And when you do that, it will bring you to this page to sign up. Okay. I am thinking of and again, I wanted to see what sort of response we got from this, but I'm going to be putting something up on our blog about this so that we can get more people subscribing to this and going from there. All right. Thank you all. I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you, Frank.
Yes. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.